Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Good morning, friends. A lot to cover today before we get into our preview for final part 3 of the Dr. Martha Saunders interview. As you know, our regular listeners, I've been in conferences for 3 of the last 6 weeks, and I'm a little bit of a conference junkie. You know, I've never shared this with you before, but when I was at Michigan State, I got the nickname the Sponge. It never really stuck. The nickname stuck is kind of stuck everywhere I've gone, but they called me the Sponge because I just engulf knowledge. I just can't get enough of it. And I'm always trying to learn something. And so I'm kind of a conference-aholic. I could literally go every week and enjoy them. And so I was thrilled to go to NCAN and to go to NACAC, in Houston, and then to go to College Board in Orlando. And I've been processing my takeaways from all 3 of those conferences. I go partly to satisfy my own curiosity because I just need to know things I don't know. I go partly to stay current with what's hot and fresh. I go so I can be a more effective college counselor with all the students I work with. And I go, quite honestly, to share things with you who may not get a chance to go, but hopefully you can learn from me, from my experience. And as a parent, you can apply it to your child. As a college counselor, you can apply it to your craft. I have so many thoughts percolating in my mind from all 3 of these conferences. I really want to take my time and over the next 6 to 8 weeks, just focus on one takeaway from any of the 3 conferences that I think is important and dive into that versus try to hit 3 to 5 points and just scratch the surface. So the thing I want to talk about today, and this came up at NACAC, definitely. I attended a really good session there on that, but it really hit me at College Board. And that is that the admissions profession right now is in real trouble. And I went to one session that said that the turnover rate for admission officers right now is 30% per year. And the turnover rate for financial aid officers is 40%. That's insane. And then I went to another session with just financial aid officers. And a lot of the schools there said their starting salaries were $35,000. $35,000. Can you imagine? I mean, the average college grad's coming up making $50,000. Of course, it does vary by location, school, and that kind of thing. But it's a very complex job with a lot of knowledge you have to have, and you can deal with a very difficult public who is really upset that how am I going to pay for school? Like, look at this financial aid award I got. This is ridiculous. You think I can afford to pay $50,000 and you don't really have the power as a financial aid officer. You're in there to help people, but people don't think of you that way. They can sometimes think of you more like a bill collector. So it can be gratifying because you can build relationships with students, but can also be a very difficult job. And I had a great conversation with an admission officer who I've really become quite fond of over the years. I'm not going to say more because he just wouldn't want me to share more, but I'll just say this. I'd found out that he had left his institution and he was at the conference as a college counselor because College Board brings together, like NACAC, brings together college counselors and admission officers. So we had a lengthy conversation about why he left. He was attending at a very prestigious university. And, he articulated what I hear over and over again, which is overworked, underpaid. And as he said, you got to give me one of the two. Either you got to give me pay or you got to work with me on the hours. And that's what you hear over and over again. And it's been magnified because the pandemic, the same thing that we've seen nationally, the Great Resignation, has impacted a lot of professions. People one of two things I found happen with admission officers. As one said to me, the pandemic took away all the parts of the job I loved. I loved the travel and it was gone. I loved the camaraderie in the office and it was gone. And I was just lonely at home. And others have said that they kind of got used to being at home and the solitude. And now they're back and having to go back to a traditional setting. And they kind of found they liked working at home. But the pay is just a really, really big problem. And admission directors, VP of enrollment, senior level people, they don't have within their budget to greatly increase pay. Mr. Barnhill, who will be on our podcast, I'm excited to have him on. He was really good. He was one of the highlights for me of the conference. He's been over Florida State's office for some time, and he's been there for 42 years. But he shared a story of a financial aid officer coming into his office and saying, I just got a job as a CFO, and they're doubling my pay. And this is, he said this publicly, so I can share it publicly. And he said, there's nothing I can do about that other than have a great life. I can't do that. I can't do anything about that. He talked about how pay had been frozen for years. And they finally got a 5% increase. And he said people were happy for a day or two. And then they came in and said, hey, guess what? Inflation's 8%. This 5%, I'm not even keeping up with inflation. So the combination of inflation with low pay and being overworked, it's creating a toxic brew. Then on top of that, and this is something that a lot of admission officers don't know, and they're increasingly finding out, you can go become an independent educational consultant and double your pay almost immediately. And if you're good at what you do, you'll be making 4 times what you were making as a admission officer. Like, how can you compete with that as a school? It's just incredibly difficult. So what's happening within the profession? Well, Rick Clark's been very transparent about this, so I can share this. At one time, they had 4 seasonal readers. Now they have 60. Seasonal readers are another colleague was telling me that, man, are there ever a lot of advertisements for seasonal readers right now. Just so you know, and I want to have an interview with seasonal readers, and so you guys can really do a deep dive on seasonal readers. But seasonal readers are trained to read files. They get to work from home. But they're not getting salaries and benefits. They're not traveling. They don't have territories. They're not around the table when discussions are occurring in committee and about who to admit. But they're taught to read a file and whatever school's rating system they use. And we probably need to do more deep dives on different rating systems. So you can see some people use a 3-tier and a 6-tier and all these different kinds of things. And there's 1 through 9 and 1 through 5, and high is good and low is good. There's all kinds of different models out there. I think that probably make for an interesting podcast episode we should probably do sometime. So they read and they rate and they work from home. And by the way, it can be a really good way to learn a lot about admissions, but it's not a high paying job. The rates that I see out there for seasonal readers are $15 to $25 an hour. So that's a lot cheaper for a school to pay seasonal readers than it is to pay for salary and benefits and expenses for travel and all of that. So seasonal readers are on the rise. It's one way schools are combating it. Mr. Barnhill from Florida State, he said that he's telling all of his 20 and 21-year-olds who are tour guides and tour guide heads and panelists, you know what? There's never been a better opportunity for you because we have a lot of turnover. Come in here and put 2 to 3 good years of service in our office, and a lot of times those are paid positions. And I can't promise you anything, but you'll be setting yourself up really nicely to get an offer. So the other thing is hire a lot of 22 and 23-year-olds, first job out of college, professional job, benefits, travel all over the world. That's pretty attractive. But then you just keep losing your more experienced people that need to make more money and keep hiring younger and younger. That's one way schools are combating it. Another way is just to pile the hours on. I was having a conversation with a friend this week who shared with me that when I was a seasonal reader, it would not be uncommon for me to have to read 100 files in a day. 100 files in a day. Think about that. 10-hour days, 10 an hour, 5 minutes a file. That's tough. So these are some of the things that schools are having to do to combat the turnover. But the money's just not in the budget to pay them. And increasingly more and more of them are realizing, well, I've got a really valuable skill set, especially if you've worked at a school that does holistic admissions and it's more highly selective. I can become an independent educational consultant, work when I want, where I want, with whom I want, and make way more money than I make as an admission officer. So, it's one thing for somebody to not be happy with their pay at a dead-end job without, where they don't have leverage or career path, but people that have done that job are highly marketable. So it's just a very difficult situation right now that the profession is in. And there's a lot of talk about it at both the last two conferences. And I wish I had great answers and great solutions, but I don't. Some of the schools, what they're doing is they are learning to really listen to their employees and to try as much as possible to cater the job description around what they like. So, for example, some of them are doing things like work from home 2 days, come in the office 3 days, or, half day Fridays, or, maybe you work from home 3 days. And one of the things this has led to is less tours being available. I originally thought when there were less tours, I thought it was all about COVID and cautiousness in response to COVID coming back slowly. I've come to realize that a lot of it is, as deans, directors of admission, VP of enrollment, senior level people doing what they need to do just to keep their staff from turning over. So having to cut down and curtail some of the public-facing responsibilities that the staff has just to keep them happy and to keep their sanity. Otherwise, they're going to lose them. So what are the implications of this? Well, I'm giving families slightly different advice than I used to. I'm really encouraging people to be sensitive to how busy and overworked admission officers are. So what does that mean? It's little things. College counselors, don't make your recommendations more than one page. Don't do it. You can pack a lot on a page. Applicants, no excuse for a resume more than a page. I'm seeing some amazing one-page resumes my students are doing. You can pack a lot on one page. I used to, back in 2012 to 14, I put together a 10-hour college admissions video series in a box. It was your counselor in a box series called Game Changer. I used to encourage students to reach out to their local regional admission officer. Said if you're in 10th grade, like once every 6 months, 11th grade, once every 4 months, 12th, once every 3 months, that's too much now. That's just too many emails. They don't have the capacity to respond that frequently. Of course, not all schools like getting them anyway. I'm talking about there's a certain kind of school that loves to get to know applicants. And that's the kind of school I was talking to. But even for that school, less frequent, a couple times a year. They just don't have the capacity. I hear my students say to me all the time, I send an email and they never got back to me. Well, now you know why. They're working crazy hours. And so just there's little things like that you can do. Even when in Common App, when it says we'll allow 3 other recommenders, send 1. Just have to be sensitive to how many hours that job is and how stressful it is, and do what you can do to lighten the workload. So that's one thing that I wanted to share with you. I have many other thoughts from the conferences that I'll be sharing with you in future episodes, but that's my thought for the day. Now, I have a pet peeve. I've never shared it on this podcast, but I'm going to share it. I'm somebody who's very careful about language. Words have connotations and denotations, and you have to be very careful about what words connote. That's why you don't hear me use the word safety school. I hate that word. Nobody wants to go to a safety school. And I actually don't like the word reach school either. I don't like that. Within our company, we use the term challenge school. Why? It's more challenging to get into, but it's also more challenging to excel at and to get high GPAs and things like that. And the nuance, I think, is more appropriate. As soon as you say reach, then people want to go to the reach. At KIPP, we use the term far reach. That's supposed to be a school that you shouldn't be applying to because it's really low probability. I don't like that term either because people like the far reach. Oh, far reach, then I want to go to it more. We use the term long shot to make it clear. It's a long shot. It has more of a nuance to it. It may not be good for you to be taking a lot of time and money to focus on something that's a long shot. Sometimes you'll hear me use the term unlikely. It's an unlikely. So I'm really big on words because I really think that they have connotations and nuance, and it impacts people's thinking. So I said all that to say this. I hate the term supplemental essays, and that's the most standard term that you hear used to refer to the college-specific essays. I call them college-specific essays and custom questions. And why do I hate the term supplementals? I hate that term because it implies less than, ancillary, secondary, when oftentimes they count more than your personal statement. So I don't like that term. It's a pet peeve. And I find that admission officer after admission officer after admission officer will tell you students spend all this time on their personal statement and they just blow through what some people call the shorties. And why? Because they think they're not as important. Well, if you're going to call them supplemental questions, no wonder people think they're not as important. So I refer to them as college-specific essays and custom questions. And I think it gives them the respect that they are accorded to in the admission process. All right, friends, I said on the last episode that I was going to share a few more books that I highly recommend. Now, these are all books I've recommended before. But when you get to the point where you have what we have now, I think 60 books, 60 websites, maybe more, on the yourcollegeboundkid.com resource section, I know it can be overwhelming. So these are some reference books that I strongly recommend you have, books you'll go back to refer to over and over again to learn more about colleges. And so the Fisk Guide to the College, I think it's a must-have book. Deep, detailed descriptions that are very well done. Ed Fisk was the former, what was his title? He was lead education reporter for the New York Times up until 1990. And for the last 32, 33 years, they produced this fantastic book where they visit the schools and meet with the presidents and the provosts and the heads of departments and students. And they write a description that makes you feel like you're there. I rarely disagree with the entries in that book. If I know a school really well and I read that description, it's almost always spot on. I have one beef with the book, and that is it leaves out schools like Mercer and some others that I don't know how in the world you can't have a school like Mercer in a book like Fisk. And there are about 12 schools I can think of that I don't know how in the world you could not include this if it's supposedly. Now, they don't quite say it's the 300 best schools because they also say there's some interesting schools that they put in to have a diversity. But there's just schools there that it's inexcusable to me that they're not included. And that's literally my only beef with that book. So that's a book everybody should have in their library. Another book I believe everybody should have in their library, if they're looking at selective liberal arts schools at all, is the book Hidden Ivies version 3 by Howard Green and his son. Just a fantastic book. Looks at 63 Ivy caliber schools that don't have the Ivy name behind them and does a deep dive similar to Fisk, a lot of times even more in depth than Fisk. And I need to have Howard Green on the podcast. He's been in the business for over 50 years. He was dean of admissions at Princeton in 1968. So imagine having 54 years of experience on top of that. I got a chance to meet him at the Hotchkiss School 4 years ago. We had a great conversation. And he's just such a great guy, too. Big heart, wants to help people. He and his son, Matthew Green, they do really, really good work out of Connecticut. And he's just written an absolutely fantastic book. I've loved that book. I loved version 1. I love version 2. And I like the updated version. That's a book I think everyone should have in the library if you're looking at these interdisciplinary, small schools, small classes, residential-based, strong sense of community. Absolutely love that book. And the third book that I recommend everybody has as a resource book is Public University Honors. Inside Honors 2021, Ratings and Reviews of 40 Public University Honors Programs. And the book's by John Willingham. So this book looks at 40 of the leading honors colleges and really breaks down how they're different. Because honors colleges are incredibly different. They're different in terms of the benefits for being in the honors college. They're different. Some of them come with scholarships. And, the book used to do a ranking, and I hate rankings. And they realized we can't do a ranking. So now they do a star system where they group them in tiers of what they consider these are the top tier, next tier, and at least it doesn't have the precision of your number 3, your number 9, which is, obviously you can't do that because it's a ranking for who. Everybody's got different needs. It's customized to each person what they're looking for. So those are 3 reference books I recommend all the students we work with have. Now, if you're not looking at small liberal arts schools at all, then you really wouldn't need Hidden Ivies, although it does have some universities in there, smaller ones. If you're not looking at public honors colleges, then I guess you wouldn't need the Public University Honors book. But in general, those are 3 books that I recommend that everybody have in their library.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, let's transition and talk about our interview for the day. And it is the final part of my interview with Dr. Martha Saunders. As you know, by now, she's the president of the University of West Florida. And in the final part, she talks about what makes the University of West Florida special and distinct from other colleges. She talks about what are the other programs that they offer that would draw a student to come to UWF from all across the country. And she points out 3 programs in particular that are exceptional, that are drawing students from all over the country and the world. She also describes the type of student that thrives at UWF. And she also describes the type of student that is at risk of floundering at UWF. And Dr. Saunders tells us what she means when she refers to inner-ballast. And she also tells us the cost to come to UWF and why it is such a financial bargain. And then I close out by putting Dr. Saunders on the hot seat. Listen and enjoy. Let's transition and talk about West Florida.
Okay.
What makes West Florida special?
Oh my goodness. I often say space and place. We're on the Gulf of Mexico, beautiful, beautiful beaches. We're the western gate to the Sunshine State, where Pensacola is right there. So it's a beautiful place, a beautiful region, lots to do. Our campus is 1,600 acres, and it's more like a park than. It's a different vibe. Our academic programs across the board are strong, whatever the major. And I've been in lots of places, and I would hold us up against any as far as quality. But I think my experience here, where we are different, is that we have always, it's been very much part of the culture, we have a commitment to what I call a good handoff. We don't hand them a diploma and wish them well. We hand them off to the next place. It might be graduate school, but we want to make sure there is a clear and firm move to the next place. And in some ways, even when I was a faculty member here, it's kind of a competition. I thought, all right, my students I've got 50 graduating or 80 or whatever, and I've got them all placed, even though it wasn't my job. It was, like I said, it was a little bit of a brag thing. All of mine are good. I've got them on the next handout. And that is, we're very engaged here, and that's very much part of the culture. And we're in their business.
Mm-hmm.
At graduation, I tell them, I said, now you are alumni. And I said, we are inextricably bound. I said, you can change your name, you can change your address, you can change your hair color, but you can't change your alma mater. And so our successes are their successes, and their successes are our successes. We are in it together forever. And that, it permeates everything, that we do. We're all in it together.
So what would be some of your programs that might draw a student all the way across the country? I know all your programs are good, but we know there are lots of schools out there, right? And I know you have a lot of students from Florida because Florida is a big state, and Florida is very generous when it comes to Florida Prepay and Bright Futures. And you're cost is already really low compared to a lot of other states, but that can also make you very attractive to out-of-state students as well. So what would be some reasons why a student might leave a place like California or Chicago or New York and come to
A
West
lot of our
Florida?
program, a lot of our out-of-state students are attracted to our marine programs. I mean, we're here on the water. We have,
Sure.
miles and miles of beach. So, like, marine biology is one that has brought in traditionally lots and lots of students. Our graduate programs bring in a lot of students, and some of that is because these programs, many of them are executive format where they can do some in person and some online. And so I think we've attracted there, and now I guess our hottest one is cybersecurity.
Hmm.
We jumped in early. We are the hub, an NSA endorsed hub for the entire Southeast, for working with other schools that are starting those programs, and we're helping them get their Center of Academic Excellence credentials. So we seem to be bringing in, getting a lot of attention with that today. Um, but I think, like anything, these things could peak and it will be something else. So our geography has influenced a lot because they can get things here that they just simply cannot get any other place. We also are just a very historic area. Pensacola was the first settlement, America's first settlement, 1559. And so we have strong archaeology programs. We bring in a ton of students from all over the country in the summer. We have an underwater archaeology program. And so they go out and salvage old Spanish ships. And so for the summer programs. So I think those are, particularly uh, interesting to students. Uh, they can get lots of things, lots of places, but this is where I think we really shine.
No, that's fantastic, and it makes a lot of sense given your location. I know that Panama City and Destin are very popular places in our home, and now that my kids are 26 and 23, we have timeshares, so they can just go on their own with their friends,
Yeah,
and the beaches are the best anywhere. The sand and the water, and I know people aren't they're going to college, they're not going to the beach, but boy, that can be a nice value added for quality of life. That can really just help your experience.
nature trails and hiking and fishing and sailing is big. We, have student sailing clubs and anything they want to do. We pretty much have a club for it, and so I think there's just a lot of variety here
Hmm.
that that is unique to us, and we bring in kids just for that.
Describe the kind of student that really thrives, at UWF, and maybe a one that maybe may not thrive so much, so people could get a sense of that.
I think, just and maybe not just here, but other places, and I call it purpose. They need to have in their heads
Hmm.
why they're going to school. And and a student taught me that one day. uh, he had come from a very, very poor environment. His grew up in projects in Miami, and he said he had written on his computer, had a little sticky note. He said, "I'm going to get my mother out of the projects, and I'm going to set a good example for my younger sister." 2 years after he graduated, I mean, he was able to buy his mother a condo. She moved up here,
Wow, he must have
and
done well.
his sister is a physician today.
Wow, good for
And
him.
so, but it was and that was very personal to him.
Sure, he had a purpose and he stayed focused.
He had a purpose and he stayed focused. And college is hard.
Sure.
And when things got tough, he said all I had to do was look at that note, and he was driven to that small thing. and it pulled him through. And I think I often ask students, I say, "Why are you here?" you know, and this little hand goes up in the back, and they say, "To get a job." And I say, "Well, that's good. And what will that get you?" Because they need to think about the bigger piece life.
Sure.
Do you want do you want to own a house? Do you want to live in a big city? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to live on a farm? Do you want to travel the world? Because that bigger vision for yourself will help you make that college choice. And they need to that those are the conversations they need to be having. What do you want out of life? And college will get you there, and the right college will get you there.
Yeah, and so I sense that's important for success at UWF, but probably everywhere, right? With just a trait
It
that,
is, and
yeah,
you ask about the student that does best here. I think they're the ones that come in, with a clear vision of what they want, and what they want to do, and but also that they're also our students. They're they weren't all the valedictorians,
sure,
but
sure.
they're well rounded. They may not be athletes, but they like sports, and they like to go to dances, and they like to hang out with each other. They have a lot of balance and what I call inner ballast when they show up.
I like
They're
that
gonna
term,
get through. They're
inter-ballast.
gonna get through. And if they're not too sure, we'll help them. So
Sounds great. Well, we're about to transition to the lightning round, our lighthearted time here. But is there anything else that you want to share, either about West Florida or just higher ed, or any topic we've discussed so far that we haven't, it just is on your mind or heart to share?
I think it is important, as we just mentioned, that they have a larger view for their lives. And if they're only focused on this place that we call college, um, it's not enough to make the right decision. So,
Mhm.
no, I'm good.
You're good, good, good. All right, we'll start with a lighthearted one. Someone loves what they hear, and you did hit a couple hot buttons that I know are very popular. One was beach,
Yes,
another is marine biology and cybersecurity. And we haven't really talked about this much, but West Florida is extremely affordable, both in state and out of state. And I know that's another thing that's very appealing to listeners. In fact,
we
why
have.
don't you just share
Yeah.
sort of what someone could expect to pay as an out of state student?
It has dropped considerably. On balance, the entire system is second lowest in the country, second lowest tuition in the country. So many, many students can come to Florida and even pay out of state for less than in their own home state. So that matters. But we did get federal help, but we're looking at cost to degree of under $7,000. I mean under $10,000 for an entire degree. Now that doesn't count housing and
Sure.
food and
And
stuff.
I like to count all costs, but I I've shared before, even for your flagship school there in state, Florida, UF, the total cost of attendance
Mhm.
is lower than just tuition at places like Temple and Penn State and UVA and William and Mary. And of course, if it's true for the flagship, it's going to be true for all the regional schools as well.
And that has been part of the challenge on the administration end because Florida's made that commitment. The state has made that commitment, and we're not going to raise tuition. Hasn't been raised in a long time and is not likely to be raised anytime soon. And so all the more reason for us to pick the programs.
Hmm.
Uh, that we have to be very responsive because
Hmm.
we can't offer programs that aren't going to be successful.
Sure.
Um, because we're running on a pretty thin margin. So,
Hmm. So you've got a student, a family, they like what they hear. They say, I'm going to visit West Florida. What restaurant do you recommend they check out?
oh my goodness, great! I live on the beach, so most of my hangouts are out there. They are the downtown Pensacola. If you just walk up and down Palafox, every restaurant you come to is a good one. I certainly like Jackson's downtown for for fine dining, and the Grand Marlin on the beach, for also very good seafood. But you just about can't go wrong anywhere here.
There you
On
go.
our
There you
campus, we have a new one, the Eurasian Bistro, and the cutest little robot you've ever seen brings your food to you. So,
Gotta love it. So, what is something on your bucket list that you want to accomplish?
oh my goodness, I am ticking them off rapidly. We love to travel. And so, one of on the list now is Galapagos. We haven't done that. And I thought I want to do that. My husband wants to go to Antarctica. So, going places is important. We have a lot of grandchildren, and when they turn 10, we take them on a trip. So, right now, we took a grandson to Rome because he loves art last November, and another one will be going to London. So
That's got to be a fun thing to do with grandkids. I don't have grandkids, but I
oh,
imagine they love it and you love it. That sounds like the ultimate win-win.
10 is such a good age. I mean, they've been in
Hmm.
school a while and they've studied a few things, but they see the world very differently. And so it's been great fun. Plus, I get private time with them, and I,
Sure,
have
sure.
them to myself for a while, and introduce them to wonderful places. So I
Great,
want to keep
great.
doing that.
Who's somebody you would pick to have lunch with if you could have lunch with anybody, alive or dead? I'm going to really broaden it out. So you could go
Oh,
historical or you could go current.
oh, wait, I just there are so many people, but Tina Turner.
Are you a music fan?
I am a Tina Turner fan. She, but I was certainly always a fan of her music, and then,
Sure.
she's just had she has set such an example
Hmm.
of uh, taken from where she is and getting to the next place and going through a lot of hardships. I think she's a good role model for a lot of women.
Perseverance,
Yeah,
perseverance.
perseverance.
What's a book that you have read that has impacted your life that you sort of feel like everyone needs to read this book, or I'm going to say everyone, but boy, a lot of people would benefit from reading this book.
You know, um, I read a lot. I rip through books, so I'll have to sort of think of the latest one. I can't the name of Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Ooh, never heard of that. What's that about?
Really good. Well, it's kind it it follows four different. It has somebody in the future uh,
Mm-hmm.
around this one relic,
Mm-hmm.
and it is just a riveting story that I kept I keep going back, and because I download all my books and I mark the spots and I go back and look at them. But it's hard for me to pick one. I read a lot. So
No,
usually
that's one of the
that's
hardest
what I
questions
relate
to ever ask our guests, and especially a college president who was a faculty member.
to.
You don't get there without devouring some books.
Well, I read fiction. I
Yeah,
read a lot of
yeah,
biographies too, but
sure. Yeah.
I don't read self help books.
That's okay. That's okay. We all have our preferences and proclivities. So my final question, but it's kind of a three-parter. Your best advice for students, parents, and college counselors. So a tenth of our listeners are college counselors. Most of them also are parents. And then occasionally we get some student listeners. Parents kind of are like, you need to listen to this.
One word: adapt,
Hmm.
or three words: learn to adapt.
There you go.
Things,
Because the world
things
is changing.
the
Yeah,
world is changing, and if we and I, we're always more comfortable if we have our little checklist
sure.
and we don't have to modify and we don't have to pivot. But we learned even in the pandemic, the more able you are to pivot, the more likely you are to thrive. So I'd say adapt, adapt, adapt.
And that actually applies to all three groups, doesn't it? Students,
It
parents, and college
absolutely does.
counselors.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, listen, Dr. Martha Saunders, this has been a pleasure. I really thank you for your time. If you could leave us with West Florida's website for anyone that wants to really do a little more search. And if there's any social media or any other source that you'd recommend students look at or parents to learn more, feel free to share that.
If you go to uwf.edu, most anything you would want is right there. Go to the president's site. But I'm on all the social media, and it's Dr. M.D. Saunders also. And I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
You're proving you're adapting.
And if you can't remember my name, just go to UWF and you'll find me. So,
Yeah, or just remember President.
that's right.
That's
right.
Well, thank you again. This has been really fun.
It's my pleasure.
Friends, on Thursday's episode, Vince is in the saddle. We'll be looking at an article called "There's Still One Big Trick for Getting into an Elite College," and it's written by a student at Stanford University. It's more of an opinion piece. Vince and I give our take on what we think of the content of that article. Lisa and I will be continuing to look at college-specific questions, and we'll look at a specific question that UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin, asked this year. We'll have the final part of our interview with Justin Doty and Paul McGinley, looking at Trinity University, Dean of Admission, and an athletic liaison, and what students need to know about athletic recruiting at a Division III school. And we'll also have the final part of Kevin Newton's breakdown of universities in ancient Scotland. We hope you'll tune in and join us on Thursday. And friends, I heard a story. I wish I could claim credit for this, but I have to give credit where credit is due. It's Jeffrey Salingo. And he made a statement, and I loved it. He said, you're driving around town, and you drive by this nightclub, and you notice there's a really, really long rope line at this nightclub, and you're kind of thinking about going to a nightclub. So you think, man, look, all the action's there. Look at this long rope line. Let me park my car and join that long line. You park your car, you join the long line, you wait a long time, and then when you get into the nightclub, you don't like the music. And Salingo makes the point, a lot of times people are craving doing all kinds of things to get into a college because it appears to be in high demand. And when they get to the college, they don't actually like the college. When they get to the nightclub, they don't actually like the music. And what good is the nightclub if you don't like the music just because it had a long rope line? Something worth thinking about. See you on Thursday, everybody. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.